podcastnetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Ain't no sense in going home.
Ain't no sense in going home.
Jody's got her girl and gone.
Jody got your girl and gone.
Ain't no sense in feeling blue.
Ain't no sense in feeling blue.
Jody got your sister too.
Jody got your sister too.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4.
Break it on down.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, Sergeant Hardy.
Hey, Sergeant Hardy.
And with that, we know what that means. It's time for another David's Pick on America's Web Radio. And we have another military guest on with us today, Mr. Kirt Canady, or Canady, depending on the spelling you have. Anyway, Kirt, welcome to America's Web Radio.
Well, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate this. It's the first time for me to be involved in kind of a web radio type broadcast.
Well, we're a little different, and this is not only David's pick, but it's also our salute and working with and information about the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And we also throw in something that's very near and dear to your heart, and that's the Johns Creek Healing Wall that's actually right around the corner from where I live in Johns Creek. So I know it well, and in both cases they have outstanding people. The Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, the director is Rick White, Colonel Rick White, I should say, retired. Rick is just a fantastic guy. I've never met anybody nicer or more helpful than Rick has been, and we're proud to be working with him. I guess that's the best way to say it. And then another colonel is Mike Mazzell, retired, and Mike is the president of the Johns Creek Veterans Association, of which you're a part. And again, Mike has done a wonderful, wonderful job with getting the healing wall in. It was the 50% version, 50% size version of the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. that traveled the country. And, you know, when I first heard healing wall, I didn't know all of the stories by any means. Still don't know all of the stories. But at the same token, it has done a wonderful job of healing for many, many families that lost, and many folks that lost friends or family in Vietnam. So with that being said, again, Kirt Canady is with us today, and Kurt's been very active in the Healing Wall, and looking forward to talking about it. And give us a little rundown of your background, Kirt.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, I'm a native of Denver, Colorado. And
as a Texan, we won't hold that against you.
Well, I was born and raised in Denver, and I think when I was about eight or 9 years old, my parents divorced, and my mother remarried when I was in high school to an Air Force tech sergeant, and we moved to base housing at Laurie Air Force Base in Denver. And that was my first orientation to the military. The second orientation was, you know, we had to go to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital for our medical. And that's when I got to see a lot of returning wounded veterans coming back to the States for healing. A lot of them were amputees and everything like that. It was my first introduction there. And I knew a lot of the enlisted men there because we lived in base housing where you could use all the facilities. And so after a year of college, and I dropped out for what I perceived as financial reasons. I don't know, I could probably think better about that in today's terms. But I chose to join the Army. And I did a 4-year enlistment, and that was for a European duty. And so I went into the Army in February of 1966. I did my basic training at Fort Bliss, Texas, and AIT at Fort Belvoir, and then I did a 3-year tour in Germany, and I was classified as a 62C Charlie, which was missile equipment maintenance, and I was attached to a Nike Hercules missile unit in Germany, and stayed with that unit when I came back to the States. So that's kind of the brief story. Europe was good. You got to travel. It's easier to travel in Europe. Their travel infrastructure, transportation is pretty well developed. So you could go to Paris on the weekend. You could go to Copenhagen on the weekend,
I know very well, in that I've got a son that's in the Air Force station in Germany, and he and his wife almost every weekend go somewhere. In fact, they were in France this past weekend, and they loved it. In fact, I say unfortunately, he's not looking forward to it, but his old man is looking forward to it. They're moving. His next assignment will be in at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. So, I'm looking forward to being closer to home than he is. But it's been he was stationed in Hawaii to begin with, and then in Korea, and then to Germany, and now he'll be in the States for a while, and then who knows where he'll go. I do think he's going to career it, so he's got a little ways to go, but I'm very, very proud of him.
Well, that's great.
I want to throw this out too, Kurt, and I try to do this in almost every show that I wind up doing, and I don't, believe it or not, I don't do that many shows, but the military, and just like you were exposed to it, they have tagged what I did in the military as Vietnam era. And I don't know if that's ERA or ERROR. It may have been the latter, I'm not sure. But anyway, they have a new name for us. But right now, and I've seen this with my son, my younger son, the military is fantastic. And if you're a graduating senior from high school or college or wherever you happen to be in life, or your grandparents are listening or parents are listening today, if your daughter or son hadn't considered the military, then they should take a look at it. Just like Kurt said, it's a heck of an opportunity to travel the world, and it's also training that you can't get anywhere else in the world, and it's some of the best training ever. And it can be in computer science. It's just so diversified that there's no end to it. And I highly, highly recommend any young person look and consider the military for their career, or if it's only for 4 years or 6 years, whatever you want. But they offer so much. Everything from flying to being a desk jockey, being in the medical profession, and you also can get a great education from the military and the service that you perform. So that's my spiel, Kurt.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, because it affords the opportunity. We'll see the world. You do get some excellent training, and it opens a lot of doors. When I came back to the States, I had a top-level security clearance. And even in today's environment, somebody coming out of the military with a top-level security clearance, you get a lot of job preferences. So
sure.
It's a great opportunity.
And unfortunately, I don't see, or haven't seen, maybe they're doing it and I just don't know it, but I haven't seen that many promotions for the military. And again, I recommend it highly. And if you join the military, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, but you will be joining the biggest fraternity or sorority in the world. And once it doesn't matter what branch you're in, what branch you wind up being in, and it really doesn't, today it used to make a whole lot of difference, but not today. It doesn't matter whether you're an E1, which is the lowest end of the totem pole, or a 5-star general. You're part of the same fraternity. you raise the same right hand and take the oath, and it's incredible. But you can pick out a veteran, any kind of a veteran, across the room in almost any bar, you know. And,
you can tell the difference.
Else.
There's no doubt about that. You can always tell the difference of guys and ladies who served and ones that didn't. There's a difference. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, sir. And at this point, I ought to pass on one other thing. Thank you for your service.
Oh,
and,
thank you for yours.
You know, it's all part of the love of country, and you know, it's funny too, Kurt. And, well, I'll just ask you. Okay, situation is, we need to call your expertise up. Would you come back in for 6 months or 3 years or something?
At my age?
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
I haven't had a vet on or in the studio and we're about the same age, or we are the same age, that hasn't said, "Oh yeah," in a heartbeat. If they'd let me back in, I'd join.
Well, he sure would, but you know, and if people would kind of listen to some of these old heads, I mean, because there's a lot of knowledge and practice that you can pass on.
Oh yeah, well we have General Dix, Richard Dix. That
know him well.
Okay, well, then you know what I'm going to say. He got called back in. He was a general retired, and the pandemic came along, and because Richard is a logistics expert, he was called back into the service, and he's been working on the pandemic and making sure the right mask goes where and the right ventilator goes where, and if one's over here and it needs to be over there, well, he gets it taken care of. And so we've missed him.
Yeah, because he's a real stand-up guy. Because I met him at a meeting at the Johns Creek Veterans Association. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of the founding members of that organization as well.
Oh.
So
it is a very. I've been there once. Oh, and this is another question I always ask our guests. And the Johns Creek meeting is a good example of it. As a matter of fact, have you ever met a veteran that can tell only one story?
Oh, gee, boy, I'm telling you, there's a couple of these guys we could just go on forever. And we had that sort of camaraderie there at the wall, you know, in our lapse time where we're waiting for supplies or waiting for people to assemble. I mean, no end to the stories guys would tell about their service and, you know, things they were doing outside of service after coming out.
But they're always interesting. And I remember when I went to one of the meetings at Johns Creek, and there was a gentleman there at the table I was sitting at that was a submariner, and
Submarine Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, I know Mike.
And he does have a couple of stories.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure they're all true.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
And not embellished at all.
You know, he tells an interesting story about, you know, how he got into the Marines. I mean, to the submarine units. And that was fascinating to me because I said, "Gee, tell me about floating around in that tin can."
Yeah.
And he really lays it out, and there's no doubt about it.
Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, and I've only been in the ones that, like in, I think one in Charleston, South Carolina, and you can just say submarine, and I get claustrophobic.
Yeah, well, I told Mike that I thought it was interesting. I said, but I'm 6'5", and I told him, I said, I don't think I would do too well. He said, oh, we have some tall guys in there too. I said, but they bumped their heads a lot.
Yeah, you gotta. There should have been, when you go through one of those little holes, there should be a speaker that says, okay, squat, or something. As you're coming close to it, it should warn you, But I'm not that. I don't have to worry about that. In fact, I have to worry about as short as I am. I have to worry about getting my leg over the bottom ring, not to worry about bumping my head. But I couldn't take a submarine. 6 months underwater. No, thank you.
And I was really concerned about the logistics. Because I'm always thinking, so what if something happens, something malfunctions, and everything like that? I would just panic. Some things like that. Here in Johns Creek, I also went to the Citizens Fire Academy, and that was interesting because we had to go into the burn building. So we would suit up in all the gear that the firemen had, and including the breather. And I had the misconception that, it was just free-flowing air and you didn't have to pull air. And you have a tendency to hyperventilate. And going into the burn building, and what they do, they file you into a room, and then they set a fire. And it's usually a propane fire, but you watch the fire go up the wall and then come across the ceiling.
Wow.
And
Kurt, I'm gonna have to interrupt you. I just ran a little long on a break. We'll be back with Kirt Canady right after this, and enjoying every second of it. We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp.
Kurt, we doing okay?
Hey, we're doing good.
Good.
Who is the best person to render treatment, and what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the americasbroadcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for listening.
And we're back with Kurt, and we're talking about the JC Veterans Association and their healing wall. And I want to mention the fact that it's open, and you can go and look at it any time that you want to, day or night. And also, we want to mention the fact that Peachtree Corners has a great memorial, and also the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, which is downtown right across the street from the Capitol. Georgia's becoming quite a hub of places for folks to go and visit memorials and projects that are dedicated to veterans, and I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. And it's kind of a segue into my comments about the fire academy. But there is a fire station that's right across from Newtown Park. And one of the things that the veterans do in their meetings, they always invite the firemen over for a meal. Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys kind of live there in the firehouse, and they come over. They bring their trucks over too. And but these guys sit and they have a meal with the veterans, and that's and they're always there every meeting. I don't know if they were there when you were there, Dave. That guys come in.
I don't remember. I don't think they were, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, they're usually always open and invited, and that's also, we had the conversation earlier about the wall and the damage that it sustained from vandals. And, Mike Mizell came with the idea and said, well, if they're going to put cameras up here, they need to have the cameras and the monitors over in the fire station, because the fire station is right across the street there. And if anything is going on, they can have the police there in a matter of minutes. And I think that was a good idea. So there's kind of our partnership with the police and the fire department to protect the wall.
You know, I couldn't believe it, but then again, I can't believe what's happening today too. So, there's just a different generation, and the way our parents taught us, and the way other parents are teaching their kids today. I guess I fault the parents a whole lot more than I do the kids themselves, because if the kids were well trained and well schooled, I might add, which I'm very much against our public schools and what they're not learning in public schools about our veterans, about our wars, and about what this country is all about. And I'm embarrassed to say that some of our books are so lacking in quality and information that I find it hard to believe they can even call it a history book or a history class anymore. But
yeah, it's kind of a sad commentary. So the reality is, even if we weren't talking about the wall, but vandalizing public property, when I saw the damage and looked at it, I said, well, it's probably kids that are doing this. I don't think an adult would go through that process. And I watched the scratches on the wall, and as that wall elevates and gets up to almost 7 foot in height at the center, you could see where the scratch stopped at a certain level. So obviously it was somebody who wasn't tall enough to reach above. And it came across the scratches came across the lettering and the names. That we can't repair. I mean, we can get the scratches at the top. That's just into the black part of it. But when you get down to where the lettering is, we're probably not going to be able to do anything with that.
This is what whoever did this doesn't understand, but they couldn't have been there if it wasn't for those guys and women that protected and gave them the opportunity in one shape, form, or fashion. And that's our military, and God bless our military, men, women, and all branches of the service. We are the strongest country in the world because we have the best military now of any place in the world. And our founding fathers realized how important the military was, and today I'm thankful that it's back up to the place that it was. And and like I said, if you're graduating or not sure what you want to do with your life, look at joining the military. It is the greatest opportunity going. And so you were tell us more about your service.
Well, like I said, I spent 3 years in Europe, and being in missile equipment maintenance, as it were, with Nike Hercules missiles. On stateside, the missiles were housed underground. They were in kind of elevated silos, so they'd come up an elevator and then roll out onto the rails to be launched. In Europe, they were not. They were in buildings. And what they had done is they created these, 2-story earthen bunkers all the way around. So from the land side, you couldn't see the buildings and everything. And my job was to, number one, is to do the regular daily maintenance on those missiles. And one of the things they had compressed air and hydraulics, so you had to make sure that the compressed air was at the right level. So I had to drag one of those Davy air compressors downrange. I had to maintain the 45 kW generators. Now those missiles systems down there, they ran on 400 hertz power. And during the day we had they were run off frequency converters from the German power company. But when we went hot battery, those 45 kW generators had to be online. You couldn't run commercial power.
Interesting.
Oh boy. But therein lies the rub, because getting those generators started, especially in that cold weather, and invariably you had to bleed the lines and you had to use ether to get those things going, and you couldn't do that with your gloves on. And so, I mean, you got diesel fuel all over the place on your hands, and you couldn't wear blouse boots. You had to wear the steel tail engineer boots, but you had to get those things up and running. And I always had to have a spare generator, a couple of spares, and I'd have to run those things up and down that range. You know, if one wouldn't start, couldn't get it started, I had to go back and forth.
Wow.
So I had my own deuce and half truck, and back in that trailer into a stall, you got to be pretty good at it.
I bet.
You know, and I had to maintain the power plant because that ran off diesel. Now, what did I know about maintaining the power plant? I didn't know anything, but I had to learn, because when it got cold there, you know, in the ready building where the guys come off guard duty,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't have any heat. These guys would be grumpy as all get out.
And they would find you to express their opinion, I bet.
Oh, yes, my fault. And I had one incident where I forgot to measure and reorder the diesel that went into the tank that fed the boiler. And boy, you talk about trouble. And I had to wait 2 days for that truck to get there and fill that tank.
Wow.
So you live and you learn.
Yes, sir. And the Army gives you, or any of our branches give you the opportunity to learn.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're incentivized. I mean, because, you know, that only had to happen to you once.
Right.
And then you learn how to keep that thing going. You learn how to go and make the proper checks that make sure that this thing, the igniters, when they were worn out and everything, you had to wait to get new parts in. But in the meantime, you had to keep the thing going. So,
You know, this is what, now I quite honestly only from a long distance know what you're talking about. Just barely.
oh,
But
gee.
this is what our country, the folks that have never served, they would have no idea. And you know, I guess one of the things too that I learned when I was on active duty was that some of the littlest things mean the most. Just like you were talking about a warm place to come back to. And,
Oh, yes.
you know, and it can be the littlest thing, a hot cup of chocolate, hot chocolate, or hot cup of coffee, or whatever. And we make mountains out of molehills when where you were, everything was a mountain, and there were no molehills. Everything was, I don't want to say exaggerated, but it was always the littlest thing could be the most important thing.
Yes, and it was a different type of environment. You know, where this missile sites is, they had the launcher area and the fire control area, and they were geographically distant. But where we were right in the middle of a Rutabaga field or someplace out there. And one of the problems we had was rats. And these were not the little mice. These were rats.
The big suckers.
And the big suckers. And you know what? They weren't afraid of you. When they get that big, they're not afraid of you. So I had a couple encounters with a couple of those things. And in the summer when it was hot, the ready building, we'd leave the doors open. And some of those guys would come right on in. And you're laying there sleeping, you know. One guy was there sleeping and felt something tugging on his pants leg, and he looked up, and there was one of those rats. I had absolutely no fear of you. And but you know, we adjusted, and on Sunday afternoons we didn't have anything to do. We went after these games. They had burrows in the ground, and we went after them as a field of sport. Guys sitting there, nothing else to do. Let's go do something with these things.
That's funny.
But we had pretty good times. The guys, I mean, I even on occasion had to pull guard duty when we were shorthanded. So I had to climb up there in that tower and there was nothing out there. But you had to be. We had 4 guard posts around that facility, and we'd sit up there in those guard towers for your little 4-hour duty.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I did a bunch of different things there.
You know, I'll bet you, and you and I have never met, but I'll bet you that another advantage of the military is the people that you meet and the friends that you make. And I would venture to say, even though this was a few years ago for you, that you still keep track of a few of the folks that you met when you were in.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a couple of guys that were in that Hercules missile program. That I got a good buddy that lives up here in Augusta, Georgia, and he and I go way back. I mean, years and years. That's before my duty at my discharge and working in Washington, D.C. as a computer technician. I got reacquainted with him there because he ended up in the same company that I did.
Wow. I tell you what, we're going to have to stop here and take another break. You're listening to America's Web Radio, and we'll be back with Kirt Canady right after a couple of messages.
If your health insurance premium is more than your mortgage, Ellen Deal with Ideal Solutions is here to help.
So what do you think, Kirt?
I think this goes along pretty good. I mean, some of this stuff is coming back to me. Some of the stuff I haven't really thought about in a long time, about how things work over there in Germany and what we had to do to maintain our readiness.
Oh, yeah, and the public, would have no clue. They don't know what's going on in the background.
Oh, no.
And I think about it sometimes. It's not really the government hiding it. It's the fact that they don't need to know. When I got back stateside, I was stationed at a stateside missile base. I'll share this with the audience. But most people never knew they were there.
Go to our site and please make
a
generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
My name is Kyle Hayes, a motorsports student at Alfred State College. Every year, Alfred State students compete in the Great Race, which is a cross-country time endurance rally for vintage vehicles. As you can imagine, it's pretty costly. I'm asking for your help. Your donation can make it possible for these students to live their passion and promote the vintage automobile industry. Please visit our site at give.alfredstate.edu and search Great Race to learn more and help us reach our goal. Thank you.
You're listening to America's
Okay, we're coming back.
Okay.
Network.com. Thank you for listening.
And we do thank you for listening. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank, we're getting more and more folks that are sending in and becoming patrons. And it may be $5, $10, $50 a month, but they're becoming patrons because they enjoy our programming, and we certainly do appreciate it. A lot of our programming, like this, is sponsored by my right pocket. So we do want to thank the folks that have joined us and joined as patrons and give, like I said, $5, $10, $20, $50 a month to keep this programming on the air. And it's the greatest in the world, and we have a number of shows that are veteran oriented and are military oriented, and then we have a lot of medical shows, and we just have a very diverse radio station that we try to advocate for all the good folks, and we certainly appreciate our veterans, no question about that. But anyway, we've got Kirt Canady on the air with us, and he was stationed in Germany and was about to tell another one of those stories.
Yeah, we had an incredible amount of camaraderie as units there. Especially, we had different parts of. There was a launcher crew, and then there was a fire control crew. Yeah, just different. But one of the things that happened during that period of 60s is that rank was real easy to get. I mean, so I landed in Germany as a single strike private, but when I rotated back to the States, I was an E5, and and that was kind of a strange story to how that happened. It wasn't my fault, but Providence plays a part in these things. One of the things that happened in Europe is that they had an unprecedented amount of military vehicles involved in accidents. Now, you can imagine if you're out there on the Autobahn and everybody's going 180 miles an hour, and you're out there in a deuce and half, and you look in your rearview mirror, and there's a big Mercedes coming down the road, and he's got to be 2 or 3 miles behind you, flashing his lights for you to get over. And these guys are really flying. So there's been a lot of accidents. And so I had my truck, and I went to the motor pool to pick my truck up. My truck was getting brakes on it. And the motor pool chief said, well, this guy just came off duty. He said, take his truck. And this guy had a brand new deuce and half multi-fuel. Brand new. And I said, okay. I got in this truck. I left the concern. I hadn't got into third gear before the MPs pulled me over. And I didn't know what it was about, And the guy said they were U.S. Army roadside inspection team. And so there was a lieutenant and a captain there, and they had the little things all up underneath the truck, raised the hood. And I had my story. I said, well, I don't know what this is about, but I knew it was something significant if these guys were out here doing that. And the guy came back to me and says, let me see that logbook again. And I said, okay. I gave him the logbook. And he said, this is the first one. And I was ready for this, some bad news. He said, this is the first 100% score that we've received in the 5 years. And what I didn't understand was that if you failed that inspection, you and your commander had to go to brigade headquarters and explain that. And if you're an officer, that could be career limiting for you. But at any rate, so I got that 100% raw score, and I had to go up, and they, the general came down for a formation, put that E5 stripe on, here's a little bit of cash, and you get some days off. And I took off, and I went to Paris. The guy whose truck I was driving, he cried and cried and cried, said it wasn't fair. So, man, I didn't have nothing to do with it.
Like you said, it's fate.
Yeah. But that was one of the nuances of that. One of the things also is that I was a bouncer in the enlisted man's club. Now you say, well, gee, what kind of duty is that for you? But it was a little extra cash, And I gave that up once I became an E5 because I couldn't be over there doing that. But we had a combat engineer battalion on the same concern, and these guys spent about 6 months out of the year in the field. And these were the guys that build bridges and roads and all. And you talk about a tough bunch. Well, when those guys came in out of the field, you didn't want to be over the club with them because they're going to get drunk and they want to fight.
Yeah.
And gee whiz.
Since you and I were in, things have changed so much. There was no mixing of officers and enlisted personnel. There was no fraternization at all.
Not at all.
But today that has all changed. Enlisted and officers play on the same golf course. In many situations now they have, instead of just being an O club, it's an E&O club, and it's just things have changed, and I can't honestly say whether I think they're better or worse. I don't know. I've been a long time since I've been in, but it's all changed, and there was absolutely no fraternization at all. That would get you in some hot water, but that's all changed now.
Yeah, because I always thought that there's good rationale for that because it eroded the command structure.
Mm-hmm.
Rightly or wrongly, you could make a case that some of these officers were not worthy of command structure, but you had the organization, and it depended on it. Orders given or orders received, you have to carry out. And if that breaks down, then you don't have a cohesive front. And that
true.
was especially true especially in the Vietnam on the ground environment. And these guys had to carry out some tremendous orders. And I mean, you're in direct line of fire, risking life or limb. It's a little different in the place where I was, where you're basically in readiness and support. Even when we came stateside, and the stateside Nike Hercules, before they phased them out, they were all over the place. Sometimes in residential areas, would you believe it? But most of the people never knew they were there.
Interesting.
They never knew they were there, and they thought it was just some Army guys there. But a lot of those barracks, the missile silos are still there. There's no missiles there. They rolled all those out. But those, 2 stories, some of them 2 stories deep in the ground, and they're still there, probably full of water now. I know a couple of installations that are federal government installations now, like FEMA has occupied some, and of course, an organization you know well, that's Defense Finance and Accounting Service, the Network Operations Center in Bradenall.
Interesting. Again, you think of all of the, and for lack of a better word, stuff, but all of the different equipment and things that the military has or had, and some are still in storage, some are probably lost in action, and yet could be used. And I thought I thought it was terrible when cities quit buying. They'd be offered military vehicles that would put down riots or anything else, and the cities decided, oh no, it's becoming too militaristic, and people will think, we're trying to take over and all this. No, you're a cop's just like a soldier. He has a duty to do, and he should be given the best equipment to do it with. And Army surplus is the best equipment in the world.
Well, I mean, other than it sits there and deteriorates, and the only argument you hear against that is that it's not so much the military equipment that police use. It's probably the idea about the protect and serve mission starts to erode, because now they look at civilians as enemies. It's us and them. And that's probably one of the key reasons we have issues today, because of that attitude. I think I shared with you, I was with the Johns Creek Citizens Police Academy, and we had the patrol. We had a little old white car. I don't know if you've ever seen that around there with a light bar on top. It says Johns Creek Citizens Police. But these are volunteers. I think Alpharetta had one, an organization like that too.
Yeah, Sandy Springs still has them.
Yeah, and those are good support organizations, and they do a lot of the stuff that we were doing, like vacation checks. You're going on vacation for a week or so, and you say, well, I just need somebody just come and just check on the house every now and then. And it's good. And with traffic issues, you don't tie up a policeman in an accident, and he's sitting there tying up his time waiting on the wrecker to come and everything. You say, oh, we'll just put the flares out and we'll wait for the wrecker to come. We'll clean this stuff up for you. You guys can go on about your business. So, it works out for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of the equipment, you get a lot of criticism, especially in today's, about over-policing, and that's heavily in the news now anyway. But there's good rationale, but it's the discipline. In the military, the discipline and mission was very well founded.
Right.
These guys knew exactly what their mission was. They knew exactly what they could and they should and they couldn't do. It's very clear, because the control and regiment of the military was there. It's not always that way with police. Because one of the things you see with police is that you got single individuals in a car and not a team. In military, you got your whole team structure there.
Right.
That makes a difference of how you behave.
With that, we're going to have to take our final break. We'll be back with Kirt right after this.
This is David Donaldson with the Atlanta Healing Center, conveniently located in Lawrenceville, Georgia.
Kirt, anything we've missed?
No, you're doing pretty good. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, my journey to get to Georgia and Johns Creek and all that, because we get to see a whole lot of history in the making, and especially at our age. We talk about what military life was like. Like now they have, you could bring alcohol into the barracks. That was unheard of.
Oh,
We
yeah.
didn't have vending machines.
Well, not when I was in AIT. My, like you said, weird things happen. When I got through with basic and went out and came back for AIT, I looked up and my platoon sergeant was a high school buddy. So it wound up Okay, folks, so we're back on America's Web Radio with our guest, Kirt Canady, and it's like we were just talking off air. There's as I mentioned, one of the colonels that has been quite active with us says there are no coincidences, and yet I can say when I was in. I had a bunch of them, and the chances, and we had somebody on the other day that they had a very similar story to mine, is that they looked up and there someone was that they'd gone to high school with, and I had the same thing happen when I was in AIT. So anyway, Kirt, I love listening to the stories that you and all the rest of the men and women have had. By the way, I want to promote something, if you don't mind me doing it.
Sure, go ahead.
For the Johns Creek Healing Wall. We had a lady on the other day, a veteran, colonel, and she was talking about, she was very instrumental in getting the women's statue in front of the wall in D.C., and there are no more of those to be purchased or had, but I talked to her about just putting up a small brass something or the other in front of the healing wall at Johns Creek, and I would like to pursue it and give honor and respect and let everybody, you say military and everybody thinks men, but women played one heck of a role in Vietnam, either nurses or even outside of medicine. And I just think the healing wall in Johns Creek should have a little monument, memorial, whatever you want to call it, little plaque that shows our respect for the women that served and died. A lot of women died in Vietnam.
Oh yes.
And and I always tell the world my biggest heroes in the world are those dust-off pilots. Holy cow, what those guys did, just, when they died, and a lot of them are dying now, but when they die, Satan's got to be scared to death of them coming down.
They're tough guys.
Oh.
But Mike and I talked about something there for the women, and we even said, well, we're gonna pursue that, and basically we're gonna place some sort of monument. And we looked at the location there, going up to the walkway, and that's going to happen. It's really important, and I've had a lot of people say, well, we have to come and see this on this wall, and we discussed how we were going to do the ground lighting, and so that people could walk up there, and if you've been to the wall and that concrete walkway, that goes around the wall, around the back, and then connects with the other walkway and the rest of the memorial garden. And they had some guys come out there, and they staked those forms out and poured that concrete in one day.
Wow.
Incredible. When Mike gets these guys fired up and ready to go, they do an excellent job. But I have to give a shout out to Mike and Keith and Bill, and especially the other guys that helped there to carry those granite slabs so they could be mounted onto that concrete wall. These things are 200 pounds. And yeah, it's going to take two guys, but you're doing that for a while, and there's nobody a teenager out there.
No, sir.
And Mike and these guys. Some of the guys had back problems. Mizell had a back problem, so he's not going to be doing that. But it was hard work, and fortunately, it was slow enough because we only had one guy who was the mason that was actually cutting and trimming and making sure that stuff was glued and adhered to the wall, the concrete thing. Mm-hmm. And we had guys that were dedicated. Every day we're there. If we didn't get rained out, or they had to do some other work to adjust the concrete itself that the granite slabs went on. But that was hard work. And these guys, nobody was a teenager out there doing that stuff. And we had a lot of people come and just stand and watch. But you didn't get a whole bunch of people out there helping. Because there's only one stonemason there. So that was, if there were two, process would have went faster. But you had to wait on him.
But I'll make you another bet that anybody that was there that was volunteering, you didn't have to ask them but once.
Oh yeah. Most of the guys that came out there, and this everybody understood, if they were physically able to lift those 200-pound slabs of granite, they would. But a lot of the guys weren't. And then, of course, we had the virus we were contending with as well.
Right.
So that kind of limited how much, and doing a lot of physical activity with a mask on, your oxygen level gets kind of low.
Mm-hmm.
So, you invariably got to stop and take a breather.
Sure.
So that was the other thing that contributed to it. So fortunately, it was only one brick mason doing this stuff, but the activity was slow enough, other than the lifting, but it was slow enough that you could kind of catch your breath.
Well, it's an amazing project and a beautiful project, and want to invite anybody either that lives in Atlanta or lives in Johns Creek or close by, go by Johns Creek and the Newtown Park and look at the healing wall. But with that being said, we have a lot of listeners all over the world, and if you're coming to Atlanta for vacation or for any reason, look up the wall and what it's all about. And then, if you can't go to D.C. and see the big one, well, come to Johns Creek and see the 50% size. But, this is something that you and I touched on, Kurt, that bring your kids and grandparents and parents, explain what the healing wall and what the wall is all about. The 58,000 names that are on it that died for you and for me. And it's so important, in my opinion, to fill in where our textbooks aren't filling in, and tell your kids and your grandkids and their grandkids about Vietnam, about World War II, World War I, Korean War. And if you go to the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, they can be exposed to every war that we've been in. And this is true of the latest, the Gulf War, the Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and the heroes of people, and understand and get an idea of what it means to to raise your hand and say, I will be a part of this, and I want to defend our country, both foreign and domestic.
Absolutely. It's one thing, Dave, I want to share with as far as the wall and as far as looking at the future completion. One of the things we're looking at coming down the pike here is to get the kiosk installed. And with this kiosk, that you can go to the kiosk and you can go in and you can find a name on the kiosk, and it'll tell you exactly where, what panel, and what position that name is. And they'll give you a little bit of history of that person. So if you're looking for a relative, you say, well, gee, I know they died and we're in the war and everything, but I can't find it. Well, you can find the name there.
Wow.
And what this kiosk also will allow you to do is you can make a contribution to the wall there at that kiosk. And that's something that's really important. We're really looking forward to that happening.
Oh, that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. And, it does take money. And it takes money to keep it up, money to keep it repaired and in great shape. And I know that, you all, Johns Creek Veterans Association, wants to give it the best foot forward. And again, I salute you and Mike Mazzell for the work that you all have done on it, and the foresight to bring it to Johns Creek. And I salute Johns Creek, the city of Johns Creek, for cooperating and being a part of it as well.
Yes, and we've had a lot of citizens' participation as far as doing the first acquisition. We had a citizen family, Corey Davenport, that helped us in securing that wall exhibit. And we had a lot of people that made contributions. If you look throughout that area, you'll see the granite benches and with names on them. But people made sizable donations to not only to the Memorial Park, but now they're also making donations to help with the wall. So we got a lot of citizen support there as well.
And as far as donations go, America's Web Radio will take them too.
Oh yes, I can believe.
And we want to keep doing the job that we're doing. You're hearing things on America's Web Radio that you'll never hear on any other station in the country, as a matter of fact. And we're very proud of it. We had 2 doctors on today. Well, 2 doctors, and one of the doctors is also a politician. So we covered all of our bases this morning. But and this is what we're all about, is to give the audience, and we have people in Australia that follow us. We have people all over the country, and England. We have a very good audience in England, and it's always fun to hear from them. And if you're listening and you haven't contacted us, we'll do, and we'd love to hear from you. So, with that being said, I want to thank Kirt and Rick White. Rick put Kirt and I together, and I want to thank him. And Kirt, thank you for giving up an hour on your Thursday to tell us about what's going on in Johns Creek, but also what you did in the service, and how, like I said, I love the service, and the service should be in everybody's mind to potentially join and give back to our country, the best country in the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I really appreciate being part of this. And I again thank Rick White for putting me in contact with you. He's a good friend, and we developed a lot of camaraderie there working on that wall.
Well, there's always one other little thing that I like to ask, and that is, will you come back?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We got more stories to tell.
At least one or two.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in the interim, you can figure out what stories you're going to tell, and we'll have you back on.
Hey, man, I really appreciate it, Dave.
Kurt, thank you, sir. Talk to you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Bye.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Want to give your family or loved one the perfect gift? Then go online and check out the TornadoBodyDryer.com. I love mine and the warm heat air massage it gives me after my shower. The Tornado Body Dryer is super. You'll love